Magalhael to Stokes, who's onside. 1-0.
Here's Sims. It's a good service from Southampton. They could finish the job here. It's Shane Long, and he has done it. Just a minute to play. That's stoppage time. Here's Letizia.
Hello and welcome. It is the Saints FC podcast, and it is episode 100. I mean, Tom, did you ever think we would make it this far? I mean, 100 episodes from those humble beginnings with Jason Dodd and Neil Madison all those years back in my front room.
Yeah, and I remember those cold Monday nights in Hackney, and now look at us, so glamorous, moved up in the world.
And then, not only is it our 100th episode, but we've got a double celebration because we're welcoming onto the podcast for the first time birthday boy Jacob Tanswell. Jacob, welcome to the podcast and happy birthday.
Thank you for having me. It's an honour to be here, especially on the 100th episode as well. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and Tom, how's this to make you feel old? Jacob is 20 years old.
Oh, don't say it.
An accredited Premier League journalist covering Southampton for Prost International. And listeners, I've invited Jacob onto the podcast because, in my humble opinion, he is writing the best stuff about Southampton this season. So get yourself onto the Prost International website, or have a look for Jacob on Twitter. I've been retweeting a couple of his stories, and have a look because it's really good stuff. Don't want to flatter you too much though, Jacob. We still want to make you perform in this podcast. Tom, before we get on to Jacob and the game, I think, on the kind of 100th episode, we ought to take a moment to reflect. So I was just wondering if you had a moment in mind that you can think of that either typifies 100 episodes or your favourite moment from doing this.
Oh, that's a good question. I'd have to say, it's very early on, and it's something we've not really done a huge amount of since, but I thought the interviews with Jason Dodd and Neil Madison were brilliant because...
So in 100 episodes, you're choosing episode 1 in the 98 previous episodes. We've not bettered it.
Hear me out on this. So if you do want to listen to other podcasts, there is another podcast called the Football Books podcast, and they had a very talented journalist, Ubar Butler, on there talking about Matt Letizier's Taking Letizia book, which I'm sure any self-respecting Saints fan has read. And what they spoke about was exactly kind of what I found fascinating about the time with Jason Dodd and Neil Madison was that time when Premier League football was starting to professionalise. Obviously it was professional before, but, you went from the sort of era of slightly overweight, obviously very talented, but sort of athletes in the loosest sense of the word to to the evolution we've got now, which are sort of 0% body fat Terminators. And I found that just really interesting about it because they were kind of that was the fading days, wasn't it, of the kind of, before the Premier League was full of super athletes, elite athletes.
It was the era that Charlie Austin ought to have been born into. He'd have made a great mid-90s Premier League football player, I think. And the lifestyle to boot with it. So that's it, Tom. Just episode 1, that's your favourite of the 100.
Yeah, sorry. I'm going for it.
One of the things I'd say is the getting Mick Channon to record an episode with Mick Channon Jr. For the 99th episode, I thought was a real treat. And anyone who hasn't listened back to that, I think you should. Also, one of the things I loved about that was it's just a father and son chatting about their love for Saints. And I think getting all a bit soppy here, but actually, with Southampton, I've been going to games, been going with my dad, my brother, father-in-law, my granny when she was still alive, and it's just something which has kind of come through the family. And I've not really gone with mates that many times or got to know the wider Saints family that much, but doing the podcast, there's been times when like when someone comes up to you at work and says, "Are you the guy from the podcast?" That's a bit weird. When you go in and buy yourself a beer at a wedding, and then someone's like, "Hey, you're the Saints podcast guy," and then also being hugged in the away end at Arsenal by complete strangers, stuff like that, which is just, you just can't. You just like that sort of stuff. I just had no experience of before, and that's amazing. But I think also maybe having Matt all the way from California over in our front room in Hackney and meeting him, that was pretty amazing as well.
I took him to West Ham away where we lost 3-0. We were losing 3-0 in the first half. What a game to travel all that way for.
It's dreadful, isn't it?
Awful.
Jacob, we won't press you for your favourite episode of the last 100. I mean, I know you've probably listened to every single one of those in preparation for coming on today, but I'll spare you that embarrassment. Well, should we get on to the Saints Wolves game, because I think that's kind of what our listeners are here to listen to.
Yeah. So for me, I love that game. I looked at it, and for me, it was a real good game of tactical cat and mouse. It was the first time in their history where Nuno didn't go with a back five. And when I saw that, I thought, this is, although Connor Cody's unfit, this is a reason, because you look at the likes of Saints, especially in them central areas, and having an extra midfielder in there for Wolves was going to cause issues for Saints, and something that Saints have had this season. So I was really looking forward to seeing how Saints adapted to that and how their game would have been influenced by it.
It's a really kind of interesting point, and almost if we fast forward right to the very, very end of the game, I think you can see that mutual respect between Nuno Espirito Santos and Ralph Hasenhüttl. They at the end, both of them kind of looked quite pleased with the point. I think they kind of both felt like they were quite pleased that they weren't outdone by their kind of their significant other, I suppose, on the other team at the end. And I think they both kind of looked like they had gone through sort of several rounds of tactical battling, and it was quite a topsy-turvy game with Wolves being on top, Saints being on top, Wolves being on top, Saints being on top, and it was quite back and forth. And there are times of the game when I thought the game wasn't going anywhere, but then it would quite quickly turn on its head. It's very interesting. I mean, Tom, what did you make of that?
Well, Ralph said it was probably one of the best performances. I think he said even the best or one of the best performances of the season. And yeah, Wolves are really good. John, you and I went there last season, and they're a really good football team. And they missed Connor Cody. I remember being super impressed with him. But yeah, they're very big and they're very strong. And it was actually one of the first times I've sort of seen Romeu bounced off the ball sort of several times in the game, and Ward-Prowse also kind of out-muscled. I think, it was a very credible result for Saints, and it shows how far they've come, because, if you'd have said, a year ago, you'll get a 1-1 draw at Wolves, Saints would have, snapped your hand off for that. And obviously now they're slightly disappointed, but I thought it was a really interesting game. I thought it showed both teams' strengths. I thought it showed both teams' weaknesses as well in terms of finishing. I thought Saints' finishing was and decision making sometimes was pretty poor, but also just to marvel on the spectacle that is Traore, and how that he is just completely and utterly unplayable. And Saints did what Spurs did, which is they recycled the fouls through the team. And I couldn't believe when I saw at the end of the game that not a single player of Saints got booked, when anytime Traore got near the ball, we barely tried to tackle him. They just kind of... I mean, at one point, James Ward-Prowse just comes across and just throws him to the ground and sort of says, well, that's that then. That's it, job done. It was amazing to watch. I thought it was astonishing that Romeu didn't get booked. I think, was it from it was the free, actually probably the first kind of decent chance of the game. I think Romeu, I can't remember who he scythed down just outside the box, but it led to a free kick, which came off the wall, and then it was recycled, and then there was a shot, and then a really good sort of double save from McCarthy where he parried it out, and then Donker then kind of hit it back, and he managed to get back onto it. But yeah, really, I mean, I found that amazing that Romeu didn't get a yellow card for that. I thought it was a yellow card all day long. I don't know if I need to go back to Traore as well. Yeah, I mean, Ward-Prowse could have had one, but I remember last year, Tom, Traore was on that wing, wasn't he? So right next to us. Yeah, where the away end is in Wolves, you're along the side of the pitch rather than at one of the ends or one of the corners is normally the way. And just seeing the guy, he's a man mountain, isn't he? I mean,
Gineppo didn't stand a chance, and it's not often that you see Ryan Bertrand being out-muscled or being kind of outsmarted by a player, but he had that. So should we come back to Traore, and then perhaps let's talk about this chance for Wolves, and then let's go into the fouls, because I thought that was quite interesting. We kind of got away with it, didn't we, with this one? I thought McCarthy did really well to get up, and it was probably fortunate that chance fell to Dendoncker as well.
Well, his first save wasn't great. I think, he kind of redeemed himself, because I've never been a goalkeeper. I'm 5'5". I'll be the world's worst. I'm scared of the ball, so I'd be terrible in goal. But he kind of, the first save is probably not what he wants to do, isn't it? It's probably not put it back in that area. But fair play to getting straight back up, and I think it comes off his shoulder in the end.
I was kind of quite amazed, because in real time it looked like he sort of saved it from the floor, but actually in the slow motion replay you could see he was up to his feet and had his body spread really, really quickly after he'd parried the shot out, which I thought was quite impressive. Jacob, you've got like a bit of an insight on the tactical fouls, haven't you? And seeing as we've brought it up already, and we're a few minutes into this game, and we've seen the first really major tactical foul from Romeo, what are Saints trying to do here?
Well, it's when you look at Southampton, a lot of them look like schoolboys, especially Ward-Prowse. They look like Butterwood at Mount. They're not exactly one of your back in the day Patrick Vieira, Roy Keane type of teams. What they're so good at is they're good at pretending to be innocent. So there's not one player where you think, right, he's going to be the guy that makes the tackles. They share it around. Often the midfield too, because obviously Romeo doesn't have the most mobility, and Ward-Prowse is, although he can handle himself, he's not the strongest. They're very good at being niggly, and that's so important for Southampton, because the way Southampton play, where they're often exposed in the wide areas with the full-backs going high, they've got to stop counter-attacks at source. So therefore, Ward-Prowse and Romeo have to develop making fouls, but not making too many fouls and getting sent off. But obviously, how many yellow cards is Romeo on now without getting sent off? 49 or something?
Is that right?
That was very impressive.
So has he not been sent off?
No, it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, I noticed it, especially against Wilfred Zaha, because we all know Ward-Prowse and Zaha, is although them two are the battle, they're very clever. So I remember at Southwest Park, Stuart Armstrong got involved, Cedric got involved, Romeo, Jack Stevens. They all share it. They all know who should make the tackle next, and who's potentially at risk of getting sent off. And the way they do it is so innocent and so subtle that other teams haven't cottoned onto it yet, apart from a few Saints fans.
I mean,
I find that amazing, about Romeo, because also, how many times have you seen him get booked after like 7 minutes? And you're like, oh God, there's no way he's going to last. That's incredible. He's never been sent off for Saints.
I mean, it's no wonder that Ralph absolutely loves him, because, with tactical fouls being such a big part of his tactics, to have someone who can pretty much guarantee that he'll always get a yellow card but never get a red is an important part of that game. And it's been really interesting to see Saints develop this over time. And Jacob, Tom and I have spoken at length about James Ward-Prowse. So when we started this podcast about 4 years ago, one of Tom's favourite questions was to ask, what is a James Ward-Prowse? And I think in the last, it's nearly 2 years now, isn't it, that Ralph's been with us? We've seen him develop into, yes, double-barreled surname, RAF haircut, Claude Puel describing him as, the boy you'd like to be your son-in-law. But he's turned into a nice little kind of nasty piece of work, actually, Ward-Prowse, and got more effective in all the other parts of his game as well, which has been really fantastic to see. Let's kind of like move on through the game, because I think we'll pick up on a few more talking points as we go through. I think kind of Walcott probably had the first half chance for Saints, when he got forward from, I think it was a through ball from Adams. So I think we'll come on to Adams, because I thought Adams's build-up play yesterday, I thought was just really fantastic. He holds up the ball and he's able to see the through balls. And then we had the Armstrong chance as well, which, just stretching, he kind of slid forward and just put it past the post, didn't he, from... I think that was from an Adams through ball, actually. It may have been the Walcott one was from an Armstrong or a Gineppo pass. But yeah, I thought that had gone in. I almost jumped up and went, but it just kind of crept past. And it wasn't a good chance necessarily, but it was an interesting chance. It was nice to see Armstrong kind of getting into that position and giving it a go.
Yeah, I think with Armstrong, I don't think he's quite hit the heights yet of last season. His decision making does seem to be a little bit off at times. We'll come to the Wolves goal, but yeah, I mean, we'll talk about Adams, but Armstrong, again, Jacob points out that other teams haven't really cottoned on to the sort of tactical fouls of Saints. People haven't sort of seemed to cotton on that Stuart Armstrong just kind of plays where he wants. Yeah, he just kind of drifts across that the pitch. And I think it kind of causes chaos, doesn't it, for the opposition?
I think it makes it very hard to track, doesn't it, for the opposition defenders or defensive midfielders. And I think you're right. I think Armstrong hasn't quite hit the sort of form he was at the end of last season, but he's still proving incredibly important, and I think it's because of that role he plays. Yeah,
Jacob, what's the difference between I don't know if you know, between like a Jan Valery or a Cedric and Walker Peters? Why is Armstrong able to be so much more effective with a Walker Peters behind him than he was with the other two right backs?
Because I think he's probably got more license. I see a lot of when Hasenhüttl shouts, a lot of what he says is Stewie red zone. So in that central areas of the pitch, I think if Valery or Cedric are playing, you probably wouldn't drift as much. He'd probably hold his width a little bit more because he knows Jan Valery and Cedric aren't the best 1v1 defenders. Where Walker Peters, you saw yesterday, at times Stuart Armstrong was playing number 10 for 20 minutes, and Walker Peters was against two on that left flank. He's so good at tackling and so good at his positioning, Walker Peters. He knows he never gets caught out in transition. And I just feel Armstrong is able to get into that number 10 role because he knows that Walker Peters not only provides width going forward, he also is very, very sturdy at the back.
It is absolutely fascinating, that, isn't it? And watching kind of Walker Peters develop and Armstrong develop like that with that sort of going across. And I think the 4-2-2-2 formation, which Ralph always bangs on about, is almost a bit of a cheeky lie, isn't it? Because quite often it's a 4-3-3 formation or 4-2-4, and very rarely does it kind of hold this sort of particular 4-2-2 exactly, I suppose, sort of shape. But yeah, no, I mean, it is like Kyle Walker Peters has just been a real dream, I think, to get in the team, and he's improving everyone around him. And you'd have thought you'd maybe be a bit worried about leaving him alone on that right hand side, kind of facing up to Wolves' left wing, but it just never seems to faze him, does it? And I think most of our problems came down the other side for Wolves.
Yeah, he's surprisingly, I think he looks like quite a small guy. He doesn't look, what is he like? I don't know, 5'7". He looks not much bigger than Cedric. But he's incredibly tenacious. And also I think we've spoken about this before, John. I think he's probably the most skillful player we've got in terms of beating his man. The amount of times, and he almost got caught out last night, to be fair, but the amount of times you'll see him dance around two or three players, he does that every single game. He's incredibly skillful.
Yeah, which kind of gives you those openings as well. Jacob, I want to go back to what you said about Armstrong, and you're hearing Ralph shouting from the sidelines, Stewie getting the red zone. For our listeners, can you explain what the red zone is?
So the red zone is basically where everything that's good about Saints comes from. So it's the area between the opposition centre-backs and the opposition's midfield. So it's kind of like a box. You've got to station yourselves in that area, just between the lines, the defensive line and the midfield line. And if Armstrong can get in there, he's basically in the typical number 10 role. And as soon as he gets in there, then that's when, like, red arrows, the likes of Walcott, if Ings is playing, Adams, they then make runs, and it really causes the back line of the opposition problems. So that is Hasenhüttl's preferred way of attacking. And the red zone is quite an easy, succinct way of just saying, Stewie, I want you there, rather than going through the rigmarole.
Jacob, we'll come to the goal, but with the goal, I thought it was quite interesting because Adams and Armstrong double up on, I think it's Semedo. Is that a Ralph thing as well? Flooding the back post. It was quite interesting because they both went instinctively towards the back post. Is that like another instruction to kind of outnumber the man at the back post?
Well, you saw that in certain games, they overload one side of the wing. So I remember against Everton, Ben Godfrey was playing right back, wasn't he? There was a lot of players on that side, on that left-hand side. There's a big overload. So they do like to create overloads in the where they perceive their weaknesses to be. So I think they do work on it and they do target people.
And that's the point where, I mean, those overlays, that's what is really exciting, especially if you've got one of the kind of right back or left back joining in the attack, or you've got James Ward-Prowse surging forward, because you instantly outnumber the opposition, don't you, if you can get in between those lines and into that red zone and then start having all those options either side. I mean, I think kind of in the first half, it's like, is the interesting tactical battle, but there weren't that many sort of chances of note. I think the only other one that we haven't really talked about was that kind of sort of flick on from Podence, which drew kind of an okay save from McCarthy. It was kind of pretty at him. At the second half, again, Podence hit the ball, this time from a shot at McCarthy after a good break from Wolves. And then I think probably the next kind of moment of real note was the Walcott tap in and the Walcott goal, which I think came from James Ward-Prowse and Armstrong perseverance. And I know, Tom, you're going to give Armstrong a bit of a slating when we talk about the Wolves goal, but I think him and James Ward-Prowse need a bit of credit here for the way they won the ball back in the middle of the pitch rather than kind of high up the Wolves pitch, and managed to transition to attack from the centre circle. And Armstrong particularly did well, I think, to kind of then get it down into the sort of right flank before getting it across to Gineppe.
Yeah, I thought it was. I mean, I thought the goal was going to be disallowed. To be honest, I thought the challenge from Armstrong on the young, I can't remember, is it El Murray? I thought they were going to disallow, because I thought he kind of doesn't play the ball; he just kind of flatters the kid. But you're right, and I think again it's winning the ball back, but it's about that. Adams, if you look at how good Adams' overall game is now, and in terms of his reaction for that goal, because he doesn't, the ball hits Semedo, but his first thing, he doesn't try and do anything else but just fizz it across that sort of line of danger that goalkeepers and defenders hate. And I thought it was really good all-round play from Saints. I thought it was good from Gineppo as well. It was actually everyone did the right thing, didn't they? Everyone did the smart move rather than try and be too clever.
Yeah, well, I found quite funny. So I was watching this with my dad. So we had a sort of FaceTime going on, so chatting away whilst we were watching the game. And throughout the entire build-up play, my dad was just going, "Walcott, get onside, get onside, get onside." And then finally, at the right moment, he was onside, which was when Adams kind of fizzed the ball across. But I wonder if, he was offside for so long, I wonder if the Wolves defenders were just like, well, he's just spending all his time offside, I don't need to worry about him anymore, which meant he is left free. Adams just constantly amazes me with his ability to make the right decision in a split second in those sort of kind of critical areas for the assists. And was that his fourth assist of the season already? I can't remember what the stats are. Yeah.
I think it would be. Jacob, what's the difference between Che Adams? I mean, obviously goals and everything, but what's the difference? What's happened to this guy that looked kind of a bit forlorn last year? Why is he suddenly to be honest, he looks international class at the moment.
He looks leaner, he just looks fitter. I remember last year he used to come on, didn't he? And he didn't really do much in the build-up of goals. Like, he didn't score any, but he used to fall over a lot. His touch was a bit all over the place. He didn't really know where he was. Well, I think he's a lot more settled now. Although he's a big guy, he's got fantastic touch. He can come to feet, he can spin him behind. He's not the most... He doesn't finesse the ball as much, but I think when he's got players around him who are able to thread them balls through to him, especially this year, it makes all the difference. And if you need to remember is last year when he did start games, we were playing 5 at the back, and I think that was a problem because he did have a lot of bodies around him. Where this year he's obviously 4 at the back. He's got Ings, who's just unbelievable, and the 2 number 10s. He's got a list to win to games, so I think that helps him a lot.
I mean, that's really interesting. I hadn't sort of noticed him being kind of leaner or fitter, but one thing which he's really impressed me with this season, particularly in the game against Wolves yesterday, his ability to hold on to the ball is just amazing, and hold off a tackle is just brilliant. I mean, I think that probably the best time to talk about that is with Walcott's next chance. But I think first we need to give Walcott some credit. He's got a goal here. We said he'd get goals, didn't we, when he signed Tom? So pleased to see that. So that's 2 assists and a goal for Walcott. He should have 2 goals by now. We'll get onto that. But my word, what a drought. 2006 was the last time he scored a league goal for Saints. I mean, geez. I mean, people were worried about Che Adams last season. Walcott's not scored since 2006. I mean, that's astonishing, isn't it?
I
that's
thought
nearly
it was
15 years,
because,
mate.
Yeah. It's not great, is it? I think, isn't it amazing that it's funny because football fans are very, I think they're very kind of, a lot of, and I'm guilty of this much, they don't look at like the big picture. And I was watching a slightly murky stream last night from our American cousins, and the commentator said that Walcott's been subbed 147 times in the Premier League, which is the most subbed player in the Premier League. I think it's 147 or 141, one of the two. And he said that but a lot of every player would kill to have 147 Premier League games, let alone play enough games to be substituted that many times. And I think he's a goal scorer. He scored goals Champions League, he scored goals international, he scored goals for Arsenal. He didn't score many for Everton, but he's not that old. We've not signed like a 33-year-old. We've signed a bloke who looks as fit as he's ever been and mentally in a better place than he's ever been.
Yeah, Jacob, what have you made from Walcott's addition to the side?
I'm quite surprised by how easy he's fitted into the system, especially against Newcastle, where he was up front, taking Danny's place. His off the ball movement was great. He can run in behind. His pressing, in terms of recognising when to press and recognising when not to, has been excellent. On the sidelines, Hasenhüttl doesn't really shout at him, where as opposed to Moussa Djenepo, for example, he's kind of talking him through the game. So Walcott is come back. Although we can say whatever about his missed chances, he certainly fitted in really well to the system.
And do you think there's an element there as well about the younger players at Saints and the influence that, someone who they could look at like that, he's 31, he's super fit, mentally in a great space, he's had a really long, successful career. Do you think there's an element of, as well as what he brings on the pitch, it's off the pitch as well?
I think it was so important to bring a player like him in, because not only will he provide experience, but he also stimulates the squad. Just a new face, a guy that's won all them trophies. And seeing a guy who's won all that, and he's had that many appearances, press with the intensity he does, then the likes of Michael Obafemi should be looking at that anyway, thinking, if Theo Walcott does that, I need to do that too if I want to stand a chance of getting past him in the team.
Yeah, I mean, that is and I think Ralph is probably giving that message to Michael Obafemi. He's said a few things in public, hasn't he, Ralph, about Obafemi that demonstrates that he wants to see him working harder and really fighting for that. And he's saying that other people are putting in more effort. And it's great to see Theo putting in this effort. And also, I don't know if I'm ever going to get tired of Theo Walcott just gushing about how much he loves Southampton. I mean, he absolutely loves the club. It's incredible. It's almost like he's gone back to his first love, after, a failed relationship with a couple of others, 14 years away. And then he's gone back to his kind of childhood sweetheart, and everything is all rosy and lovely at the moment. It's quite brilliant to hear him talking about Saints every time. He's just absolutely gushing towards the club, isn't he?
He's like a spokesperson, isn't he, for the club? Yeah. After every game, he's speaking afterwards, isn't he? And he's telling us about it's his boyhood club. It's a dream come true to be back here. He loves it. It is really quite refreshing to see a person that's gone away, competing in Champions League, coming back, and still having that same desire.
Yeah. Right, now we're going to stop the Walcott loving, and we're going to talk about that second chance.
Oh,
I mean, this really was...
Hook him, get rid of him, John.
This really was the chance to win the game, wasn't it? I mean, this was McCarthy to Adams on the halfway line, who won the ball, held on to it really brilliantly, and fantastic through ball, brilliant positioning from Theo Walcott, far up on the pitch, right, running from deep, so he wasn't offside, and then creating that one-on-one chance. And I think if there's the one thing that you'd ask Arsenal fans about Theo Walcott that frustrated him, I think he quite frequently found himself in this sort of position where he'd be running at pace towards the goalie, having been found in a sort of this sort of chance presents itself to Theo Walcott quite a lot, and certainly did in his younger days at Arsenal, and quite often he won't finish it. And I was just gutting. You'd have bet your house on Danny Ings finishing that same chance, wouldn't you? And to not get it on target, I think was pretty disappointing.
He didn't just not get it on target as well. He kind of really shanked it. I mean, you wonder, don't you, if he... I don't know if this is just an excuse that footballers say, but you wonder if he almost had too much time. And, he was so free that it was, you actually often see players get that kind of free from the opposition defender, good opposition defenders anymore. And I think he was caught in two minds, and in the end he did nothing right. I mean, I thought he was going to try and chip the keeper. I just thought that was the obvious thing to do. He had a massive space over the keeper's left shoulder to aim for, but in the end he got it really wrong.
Yeah, I mean it was exactly the same chance as Danny Welbeck had, wasn't it, for Brighton earlier in the weekend, where he chipped the keeper, and that was exactly what it was asking for. Didn't quite manage it, and I think it's kind of a bit of a cliche to say, I think at that point the game is, it's game over, it's 2-0, they're not coming back from that. I mean, we've seen that Wolves can come back from 2-0 down against Southampton quite effectively before.
Don't mention it, John.
But yeah, I think at that point Wolves would be very frustrated, because everything they've thrown at McCarthy has bounced back off him, and 2-0 up, I think they'd have found it quite difficult to come back at that point. But come back they did. And Tom, this is your big opportunity to lay into Armstrong now. So do you want to explain what's happened and why it's all Armstrong's fault?
It's not that I want to lay into Armstrong. I think this is something... I mean, Armstrong wasn't the only Saints player to do this on last night. Romeo did it and Walker-Peters did it. I thought Saints were guilty of overplaying it a little bit, which is something they've not really done that much this season. They've always been very clever about getting the ball away, and when Jacob's article, I thought encapsulated it perfectly, where they're not that worried about going forward if the opportunity isn't right. Just get rid of the ball. If they have to go back to McCarthy and start again, just start again. I thought it was almost like we tried to do some sort of last-minute FA Cup final heroics, and I don't really understand what Armstrong was trying to do. But he did two players, and then he gets robbed on the third.
He does. And I think this is a mistake from Saints. And sometimes I think when it comes off, it seems to create quite dangerous chances. But when it doesn't come off, it sometimes creates quite dangerous chances for the opposition. So it is a little bit of a roll of the, or a spin of the roulette wheel, I suppose, where it's going or not. Jimenez gets his shot away, comes off the post, and Neto's first react, but it comes out straight to him, doesn't it? I mean, it was the perfect kind of setup off the post, and I don't think McCarthy has a chance to stop that. The rest of the game, I felt like there was lots and lots of Wolves pressure. We had the offside Jimenez goal from the free kick. Do you remember this one where everyone? They didn't even step forward to do the offside trap, but the offside trap worked beautifully. That stuff really scares me as a fan. I mean, Jacob, you're blowing your cheeks out. Do you want to say how that makes you feel? I mean, are you a fan of Saints as well as a journalist, or is that just something in football that makes you feel uneasy?
Well, especially with Saints, because Saints got this thing now where from deep free kicks, they will not step back. They will stay there or step up, and they don't mind players running past them. They don't go into the box and follow their man. They say, go on, keep going. And when I see 4 or 5 opposition players having the box in, I think I really hope we've got this right. So it's quite precarious, but I suppose it's typical of Saints. We talked about Stuart Armstrong, about him losing the ball, but that's the way Saints play. They're always on the edge. And in other times, Armstrong would have gone past him, and then he would have been driving into that red zone, and then he'd have overloads either side of him. So that's the reason why we love watching Hartlepool football. But yeah, it's not one if you want to just sit on a 1-0 lead and just be calm, because them deep free kicks, you know what's coming.
And Jacob, do you think it's, because I think you're exactly right. If if Armstrong had gone past that final player, he would have taken out in a millisecond nearly a third of the outfield players of Wolves within, a millisecond. We saw Walker Peters try and do it afterwards. He got robbed as well. Is that a kind of deliberate thing of just trying to slice as many players out of the game as possible with one sort of magic bullet and then moving on from there?
Yeah, Arsenal football is all about incision, isn't it? Whether it's through passing or football, through dribbling. And we've had enough of these years of Claude Puel's, Pellegrinos, where they want to play the safety first pass or dribble. Where with Arsenal, it's just being flipped on its head, and that's something Saints fans should enjoy and appreciate it, because when we get a new manager, I doubt these risks and I doubt this brand of football will be replicated.
I mean, I'm hoping that's not for many, many years that we need to seek out a new manager, because I'm very much enjoying the Ralph Hasenhüttl brand of football. I mean, it's funny because 1-1 felt like quite a good result in the end, I think. Having been absolutely aghast at Walcott missing. And when I reflect on the Walcott chance, I feel a bit disappointed that we haven't come away with the 3 points. But when you look at the statistics and you see how many saves McCarthy made, who I think, we've got to give him some credit here, because although he didn't pull off any worldy saves, he made sure he was in the right place at the right time for almost everything that Wolves threw at him. So a lot of credit, I think, is due there. And sometimes making saves look easy tells you that there's a really good goalkeeper there. He's got his positioning right. He's reading the game well. He's setting himself well. And sometimes the spectacular save is when you're recovering from an earlier mistake. So I think McCarthy deserves some credit. But overall, 1-1 felt like a good result. And we talked about Ralph and Ralph Hasenhüttl kind of being really... He looked pleased with the 1-1 at the end as well. And I think we talked about that kind of tactical battle with Espirito Santos as well. I mean, Jacob, what stood out from the tactics, other than Wolves kind of setting up with the 4 at the back, which I'm sure would have thrown Ralph's plans? Did you notice tactical changes happening throughout the game? Was it like a game of chess, or did each man sort of stick to their guns, or was there kind of like different things being tried out throughout the 90 minutes?
I think Hasenhüttl knew this game was going to be a slog, because it's often the first game from the international break. The likes of Stuart Armstrong, I know he didn't play the last game, but they're coming back and have just a rhythm. It took a while for Saints to come back and to be in that perfect pressing frenzy style. But I noticed that Armstrong did move even more narrow in about midway through that first half, and Saints started off the ball. Saints did start to press quite high, but then they kind of replicated Wolves in a way, and they did that middle block. So they let the likes of Willy Bolly have that ball, and they said, "Come on, try and play through us." And I think that, in a way, that helped, because it stopped Ruben Neves and João Moutinho from getting on the ball. So it was a real good, we will see what your strengths are, we'll stop that. And it was a fantastic chess game, and I really enjoyed that first half. I know there wasn't many chances, but tactically, they kept cancelling each other out every time.
It's a game for the purists, isn't it? Where it's 0-0, but there's a really interesting tactical battle. Whereas, us lesser mortals are just going, "Oh, I wish there was a decent chance in this."
But I think, John, Wolves are a really good team.
They are.
I mean, they're a really, really good football team, and for us to go there and come away with a very credible 1-1 draw is a really strong result. And they have. I think it spoke volumes about the effort and the commitment that Saints players put in. And I think it was a bit like, I'm trying to think, what was the game where we drew and Ralph celebrated it like a win? I think it might have been last season, but I can't remember. But but it almost had that feeling of like getting a draw in that game was really important psychologically. Ahead of Man United, just not losing and being able to hold out. I know it was Man United, if you remember last year. Vestergaard scored, and it was really good overall. It was a really impressive performance. Yeah,
and I think kind of what some clubs will come and play Southampton with a little bit of naivety of not really knowing what they're about. I mean, we saw it with Frank Lampard when he described teams like Southampton as in, they should be sort of brushed aside. Steve Bruce kind of said that he knew what Southampton were doing, but his team just couldn't do anything about it. But I think in Wolves, what we saw was a team that knew what Southampton were trying to do and were actually quite effective in not slipping into the sorts of traps that other teams do. Like Wolves didn't dwell on the ball with the fullbacks or the centre-backs really at any point when Saints were kind of looking to press high up the pitch. And the other thing which I noticed Wolves didn't do, and this is kind of, I've got to sort of thank you, Jacob, for kind of the fact I was looking out for this made this part of the game a bit more exciting for me, because there was a point when Saints were trying to coax Wolves out of their half, and Vestergaard and Bednarek and Bertrand were all kind of holding on to the ball. McCarthy getting a couple of chances, and they were just desperate to draw Wolves out and stretch the play so that they could then launch an attack from the back, and Wolves just weren't going for it. They were sort of content to watch Saints kind of hit it around. And at that point it almost felt like there was two teams there who were really quite content to get a draw. But having read your article about Saints build-up play and the importance of us going all the way back to the start, Jacob, it was kind of, I was watching Wolves to see if they would fall into that trap, but they've clearly been reading your articles as well, or they've got some scouts about. I don't know which it is.
Yeah, I hope it's the former, but it was like it's like the Saints were trying to thread the needle, weren't they? And Wolves were not only were they not biting, trying to set traps as well. So they were going, go on, give it to Ward-Prowse, and then we might start edging forward. But in terms of Vestergaard, when he gets the ball and he does his little, he rolls the ball a little bit. He might give it to Bednarek and get it back. The whole idea is to play through. When you see Hasenhüttl, especially with no fans, he changes the tempo. So he'll say, all right, calm. And then all of a sudden, he'll see something, and then he'll start shouting go. And that's where you start seeing them vertical passes. But Saints couldn't do that against Wolves because Wolves were in such a tight block, and Saints either had to go out wide to Gineppo and Armstrong, who would then just pass it back between. And that was a problem for Saints. And I think Ralph will look at that, and I think other teams will look at that. And it'll be really interesting to see when the next time that happens, have Saints got anything about them to break them down?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, Jacob, sort of generally speaking, can you tell us about that? Say, we've just heard the announcement that fans are going to be allowed back into stadiums soon. So we're going to have 4,000 people in St Mary's for a game. Admittedly, no one's going to be allowed to shout or sing in the initial kind of return to fans, or drink, yes. Fun police, I think, is maybe which comes to mind. So when, I mean, normally kind of at St Mary's, when we have the ball high up the pitch, let's say Redmond's got it, and nothing's really showing, so then Redmond plays it back to Bertrand, who then maybe plays it back to Vestergaard or Bednarek, who then plays it back to McCarthy. And what the 32,000 people in St Mary's normally do is let out this sort of collective groan or sigh with a few sort of dissenting voices just going, get it up the pitch, Why should we as Saints fans not hassle Saints when we see them doing this, when we're back in the stadium, Jacob? It's all part of the bigger plan, isn't it? Because
you've now seen although it's on the TV, that Saints have now got the capabilities to pass it through. I completely understand Saints fans' frustration last year because Saints, let's be honest, they weren't good enough to pass it out from the back. I remember, especially early on this season, Angus Gunn would put the ball down, the two centre-backs would split, but then there'd be nothing. So Gunn would have passed it to Bednarek would look up, pass it back, then they would smash it up there. They've now got an idea, they've got a way of playing, they've got more players showing for the ball, being more confident. And I think fans will be more patient when they come back. But now they've seen it. They can see Vestergaard, who for 18 months, I personally didn't see anything from him, now doing these cross-field Virgil van Dijk diagonal balls. They see Jan Bednarek on his favoured side, the right side, passing through the lines. And I think fans will, hopefully, they'll be a lot more patient. And they've now got the evidence to be patient.
Jacob, on that, one of the things John and I discussed is how a lot of the Saints players just look better at being at football. It sounds like a stupid thing to say, but like Romeu is a better footballer than he was a year ago. The guy's 29, so it's not like he can't, you probably stop. There's probably a plateau in terms of how much you learn, but like he's just better at being a footballer Ward-Prowse is the same. Is this? I guess is this a combination of confidence and coaching and just kind of everyone being in the same place mentally? Do you think?
I think the first thing is probably coaching. Hasenhüttl's coaching is certainly layered, and if he introduced all his ideas straight away, the players, their brains would just be frazzled. So I think the first thing was getting them to work hard. So a lot of last year and the year before, you saw them play longer, put the balls into areas, almost like rugby, and then go into press. And since Saints have become better and more adept at pressing, they're now being able to refine the game in terms of their possession, so they're able to now be more confident. I've watched Romeu this year, and I describe him like a trampoline. If Saints ever got any other options, they give it to him, and Romeu, one touch, flicks around the corner or passes it back. He's just always there. And the way he does that is through repetition on the training pitch, continual. Just, it might be boring, but knowing, right, when I get the ball, I know Walker-Peters will be here, Ward-Prowse will be here, that type of thing. And I just feel they've really focused on being a better footballing team as opposed to a pressing team.
It's interesting.
There was a great Romeu bit last night where he was off after getting some treatment. I don't know if you remember this.
Yes.
This was great. It's like classic Romeu where he had to he was obviously annoyed that he had to get treatment, annoyed he'd been sent off the pitch, and then I think kind of balls broke, didn't they? And then all of a sudden you just see this massive ball Spaniard flying about 200 miles an hour to clatter someone and get the ball away. Just, it obviously just comes straight off the pitch like a bullet. It was brilliant.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Tom. That was one of my favourite parts of last night, and I'm upset that I'd forgotten it for my notes for this podcast. One of the things as well about Romeu, I think, we've seen him be the destroyer, for a long time in the Saints side. And now, and only now, it seems that we're starting to see the benefit of that sort of La Manca education and playing for Guardiola, because he can pass the ball, he can start attacks, he has got some vision, which is just not something I knew that he had, to be honest. I mean, when he won the Player of the Season award a few years back, it was very much because of the destroying, wasn't it? It wasn't because of the passing or launching attacks, but seeing Romeu being really effective, it's just fantastic. And it's the weird thing as well, isn't it? At the moment, you've got all the fans be gushing over Hojbjerg, who's doing a really, really effective job for Spurs, who are currently top of the table. So, you've got to say fair play to him, and he's working really well in the Mourinho side. But since Romeu replaced him in the Saints side, after Hojbjerg didn't sign the contract, he's been better than Hojbjerg's been for us, hasn't he? I mean, Hojbjerg was good for us, but Romeu has taken things to another level, and we're not missing him. And it's the weird thing. I think it's very rare that a sort of transfer swap like this works out so well for both teams. Like, we needed Kyle Walker-Peters more than we needed Hojbjerg, and Tottenham are really benefiting from Hojbjerg. It's sort of happy families at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. Is there something there about how, with the style that Saints play, they didn't maybe need the box-to-box player that Hojbjerg is, and you did need someone who is maybe just a lot more disciplined and a lot more, sticks religiously to a job and executes it perfectly. I mean, there's no doubt in Hojbjerg's talent as a player, but he did frustrate a lot. And I wonder if Saints, knew they were going to play this much more disciplined, much more structured way, and they felt like a Romeu was a player that could adapt to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well there's a bit of a danger, isn't there, when you're the captain, of trying to overdo things. And quite often I think if we were behind, one of the frustrations with Hojbjerg is he'd try and do everything himself and then start taking shots from 35 yards out that, with the exception of one against Brighton, were just never going in, were they? I mean, he missed loads and loads of chances. And that probably doesn't really fit anywhere into Ralph Hasenhüttl's plans, because Ralph Hasenhüttl's plans are for a very disciplined, very kind of strict approach to the way that you play football, and perhaps Hojbjerg was a little bit more maverick.
But on that note about discipline, and Jacob, I don't know if you've got any stats or you've seen this, but have you noticed that Saints don't really shoot from long range? No one really, not really, unless it's a really good chance. No one sort of pings it from 30 odd yards. They seem to sort of not want to shoot from 25 yards.
Yeah, I'm actually going to do a piece on Moussa Djenepo, because I feel some of his maverick style and some of his off-the-cuff styles kind of being stifled by the structure of stuff. And that's not an issue, but I look at Gineppo sometimes. He could be the type of guy, for example, I look at him, compared to the other 10 players, he's taken the safety first approach, because I don't think he really knows what his role is in a team. But I think in terms of going back to Højbjerg would take things on. And I always felt like I was never too sure what he'd do on the ball. So sometimes he would see a pass that no one else would see and it would go out of play. And I was just like, he would just have a brain process where not many people would be on the same wavelength. Where Romeu, what you see is what you get. You kind of know where he's going to pass it every time.
Makes it kind of easier about pay. And I didn't want to kind of make things too negative, but I thought he had a pretty tough time against Wolves last night. He just couldn't beat his man. I can't remember who Wolves had him down that side, but he just couldn't get past him ever. It was just like hitting a brick wall every time for Gineppo. And I do think he looks a little bit lost this season. What's kind of wrong with Gineppo? Because at times especially early on last season when Saints weren't playing particularly well, he seemed... I mean, there were moments, I think Tom and I discussed whether we'd signed a new player, who was going to reach the heights of Mane. And at the moment, it's not looking like that. And I'm not entirely sure why. He's got talent, and he can do things, and he can score goals, and he can normally sort of dribble, but something's not working right now.
He was a free spirit, wasn't he? I think you saw that Sheffield United goal. Would he try that now? I don't personally think he would. And you said about he didn't get past his player, Semedo, I think it was yesterday. But I can't really remember him dribbling that pace at him. When he gets the ball, he's often stood still. There was a time yesterday in the second, he picked up the ball. I just wanted to be direct, take them heavy touches, almost coax Semedo in, and then he can use his trickery to get round player. The only time I think this year he's done that was against Spurs. Do you remember he was in that tight area on the byline? He got past Doherty or something, and I think that was probably the only time. And I look at him; he's often always on Ryan Bertrand's feet. He passes backwards. He's not sure how to play that number 10 role. Where I think Theo Walcott probably hasn't got the skill as Gineppo, but he's more intelligent with his game.
In his credit, though, I would say, in the last 2 games, he's come up against 2 of probably the most dangerous wingers in the Premier League in Alain Saint-Maximin and Traoré. So he's clearly, been briefed. He's not playing Fulham. He's been briefed to you're going to have to do a disciplined job, and you're going to have to track back, defend, and do what you can to help out Ryan Bertrand. Because, I was at Newcastle last year and Saint-Maximin destroyed us, and we were at Wolves, and John and Traoré looked by far the most dangerous player on the pitch. And I think, in Gineppo's defence, I think, he's probably being asked by Ralph to be tactically very disciplined. And I actually, in his credit, I think he's done that. And there will be times when he'll be free to do the more attacking stuff. But I agree with you. He looks like he lacks confidence. And he, often, his first touch is to kill the ball dead and look up rather than just to gun for space. I hear what you're saying, but I think, he's had 2 very, very difficult games.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens against Manchester United when it's... I mean, he'll be up against Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I think, on the right-hand side for Man United, and potentially, depending on what Solskjaer does, but maybe kind of Marcus Rashford out on that right as well. So I don't know whether he'll be asked to be incredibly disciplined again, or if he might... But he might fancy his chances a bit more going forward against Wan-Bissaka than perhaps he had luck last time. We've got the Man United game coming up on Sunday. Are you feeling confident? Tom, Jacob, after you. You're the educated one.
No, I wouldn't say that, but I'm quite confident. I'd be disappointed that if Southampton didn't get anything out of that game. I look at Man United, and they don't like being pressured. You saw that Old Trafford last year, especially if Pogba plays. I think there's an ability here to nick the ball off that midfield. Fred takes a lot of touches. Matic takes a lot of touches. Pogba does. I think there's an opportunity now for Saints to be successful with their press. I can't see Solskjaer and Man United with their egos doing what Wolves did, where they just completely cancelled that out. I think Saints are going to get opportunities here, And if they're on it, especially Stuart Armstrong, because I think he's key, especially that channel where Harry Maguire is, I think Saints can cause them all sorts of problems. But saying that, going the other way with Saints' high line, so can Man United.
Yeah. I think it'll be a fascinating game. I think it'll be a real test of how far Saints will come. Man United are much better away from home than they are at Old Trafford. Saints, whilst we've got 3-2-0 wins at home on the bounce, there's probably still a bit of a home hoodoo to exercise. But yeah, you're exactly right. I think if we can get past the sort of default penalty that they get given in every game, I think Saints have got a really good chance of getting something out of this game. Because I think if you're Man United, and they've played tonight in Europe and they've done pretty well, I think, by the looks of things. But again, it's a long trip, it's a long flight back.
Not from Old Trafford, it ain't.
Oh, is it Old Trafford tonight?
Yeah, it's Istanbul last week, wasn't it?
Hey, well, they all live in Audley, just quite far. But I think we'll have a really strong chance of getting something out of them, because I just don't think they're no different to the team that we drew 2-2 against last year, and I think we're better than we were last year. They're just deadly on the counter attack, and we just Saints will be drilled for that, hopefully.
I think Saints, they've got all the tools to beat Man United here. United aren't free flowing like they were at the end of last year. I think Romeu and Prowse will be key in marking Bruno Fernandes out of the game, because everything comes from Bruno Fernandes. If you can get Romeu and Prowse to share a yellow card, shall we say, I think Saints are going to cause them all sorts of issues.
Okay, well, we're feeling positive, and we're going to have perhaps a sheepish return, hopefully, to the podcast of the big name transfer that went from Saints to Manchester United in the summer in the form of Carl Anker. So he's hopefully joining us next week after the Man United game. So we'll see. We'll check in with him, and I know lots of listeners enjoyed listening to him last season. So hopefully you'll be feeling a bit sheepish. Jacob, I mean, we've kind of talked about some of your writing, and we've been very serious, I think, in this podcast. We've been focusing on the tactics, the build-up play, and really looking at the footballing side of things. It's not all really serious tactics, is it, in your writing? Because I think the last article you threw out from the Saints was looking at Saints' position in the league table. I think 5th would guarantee us Europa League football if we were to finish there. And among the internet age of Southampton fans, they'll be aware of a song with a rather catchy chorus of Saints in Europa. How do you like that saying? So, Jacob, tell us, you met up with the Red Stripes, didn't you?
Yeah, so it was, I think we were 2-0 against Newcastle. I was just scrolling through my Twitter during the game, and there's just this tweet, I can't remember who it was from, but they said we need to get the band back together, and all of a sudden I just remember them, and I just thought, oh, that was a great song. And so I found out who they were, and I spoke to them, and honestly, when I got on a Zoom call, they were in their full outfit, they were well up for it, and I just thought this has to be a story, that has to be a funny story, nothing serious. But they're great guys, and they did it all for a really good cause, which was the Mountbatten Hospice. So we managed to raise some money from that to give to them from the back of that article. So that's what I'm really quite proud of.
So what's the deal with the Red Stripes? Are they just two mates that are Southampton fans? And because the song's a bit of a mick take, isn't it? It's a sort of a pastiche of perhaps a sort of rock Euro house crossover. I think I might have to dig out the link. I'll put it in the show notes, but I'm pretty sure most people who've listened to this podcast will know it.
They're two unique characters, shall we say. What you see is what you get with them. They're mates, and they both play in separate bands. But one of them said, "Why don't we do a Southampton song?" And they just said, "Yeah, let's do it." And they managed to get the video all done, 2 videos in successive years, and they've got it's mad. They've got 300,000 views on it now. It's almost so amateur. It just. Everyone likes it because you can just tell they're Southampton fans. They don't really care. Their dance moves are, then I don't know if they're classed as dance moves, but it's just great fun, and it really just captured what the feeling was at the time under Koeman. Yeah,
I mean, I very much kind of enjoyed it, and actually watching back, I hadn't kind of quite realised that there were 2 versions of the song or 2 versions of the video, but yeah, I've watched them both. I read your article. So I don't know if I should reveal this, but going back to the sort of Theo Walcott in 2006, I was living in Southampton, and in a house of 7 boys, I think it was second year or third year of university, and they were all musicians. We tried making a song for the World Cup. Our theory was that if it kind of took off like 3 Lions, we'd have got free tickets to go and watch the World Cup in Germany. And bizarrely, the BBC Sport webpage picked it up, and it was reviewed by Alan Hansen. I'm not sure why Alan Hansen, a Scotsman, was reviewing England World Cup songs, but perhaps a bit more of a neutral thing. But yeah, so I have forayed into that area, and it was nowhere near as catchy as Saints in Europa, and we certainly never got to as much as 300,000 views on YouTube. But there we go. Jacob, so where can we find your writing? So it's prostinternational.com, is that right?
Yeah, so they're the website I write for when I go to Southampton games. Yeah, Prost International.
And where else can we find you? On Twitter, Facebook, other websites?
Yeah,
else?
so you can find me on Twitter, J_Tanswell. I'll just tweet a lot during games and before and after, and I'll kind of tweet out the fallout after games as well. So yeah,
brilliant. Tom, any final words of this 100th episode? You've thought of another happy memory that was more recent than 4 years ago?
I've just loved spending lots of time with you, John.
So lovely.
So wholesome.
Listeners, you know how to get in contact. It's saintsfcpodcast@gmail.com or at saintsfcpodcast on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us on your birthday, Jacob. Many happy returns. 20 years young, incredible. And
disgusting.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Cheers.
And Tom, we hope you get well soon with your rather famous virus that might be going around your household.
Yeah, it's definitely going around. I mean, I don't know if I've got it because I'm too much of a wuss to take the test, but it's definitely in the house. So 2 weeks of lockdown for me.
Fingers crossed. And just as my brother was recovering, I mean, can you catch coronavirus through WhatsApp? I think we might have to investigate this.
I don't think it's that type of virus, but you never know with Facebook. They're up to all sorts.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jacob. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, listener, for sticking with us. Do let us know what you thought of the episode. And we'll see you or hear you, or you'll hear us in episode 101. Cheerio.